We're in Job 19. So last week we talked about Bildad and his speech where he used Job's own words to show that Job was experiencing hell on earth right now, and that Job was destined to go there. That was Bildad's wrong conclusion, but his right assessment of the evidence. Right, Job is suffering the curse of God of somebody who's a sinner, and he is doing that as a foreshadow of the Lord Jesus, who does that in its fullness and for us. In Job 19, Job's going to respond, and as he's done so often, he's going to start out by talking about how his friends are misunderstanding him. He's going to have criticism for them, and at the end, he's going to have warning for them, and that's something we've seen earlier. And in the middle, he's going to have a short part where he stops talking to his friends and starts thinking about what he's looking forward to, his vindication by the Redeemer. And so there's several verses, 4 or 5 verses in the middle there, where I think probably that's the highlight of the chapter. It's the centerpiece if you look at how the chapter is set up, and it's also the most hopeful. It's the only place that's got hope actually in the chapter. So I'm going to start by reading Job 19, and then I'll talk about the various sections briefly, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah.
So, yes,
Didn't we do Job 19 last week?
no,
Okay.
we did 18 last week.
Oh, no wonder. I'm in Isaiah. I did that.
You did that, yeah, a
I
couple
did
days ago.
that
You were,
before.
yeah, yeah.
All
We're
right.
just anxious.
I'll try to get back to the right place.
Yeah, it's because I've set up everything so that we're nearly in the same chapters in Isaiah and Job. So
It's true. It's
yeah,
true. All right. Well, I'm all set for Tuesday.
I had to really slow down in Isaiah though to make that happen. Yeah. All right, Job 19. I'm going to read from the ESV. Then Job answered and said, "How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words?" So he's obviously talking to his friends. "These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me. Are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it be true that I have erred, my error remains with myself. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my disgrace an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong and has closed his net about me. Behold, I cry out violence, but I am not answered. I call for help, but there is no justice. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon my paths. He has stripped from me my glory, and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone, and my hope has he pulled up like a tree. He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his adversary. His troops come on together. They have cast up their siege ramp against me and encamp around my tent. He has put my brothers far from me, and those who knew me are wholly estranged from me. My relatives have failed me. My close friends have forgotten me. The guests in my house and my maidservants count me as a stranger. I have become a foreigner in their eyes. I call to my servant, but he gives no answer. I must plead with him, with my mouth, for mercy. My breath is strange to my wife, and I am a stench to the children of my own mother. Even young children despise me. When I rise, they talk against me. All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones stick to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have mercy on me. Have mercy on me, O you my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me? Why are you not satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last, he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me. If you say, how we will pursue him, and the root of the matter is found in him, be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishment of the wicked, that you may know there is a judgment. So I'm sure you noticed the three sections there we have at the beginning, the longest section, verses 1 through 22, I think it is. We have the Job criticizes his friends, and he says that God has done this to him. He also asks them for some mercy. Um, in verses 23 through 27, this is Job's hope. He's expressing his hope in the Redeemer. He knows that he lives. He knows he's going to see him in his own flesh um, at the end. At the end, he'll see the Redeemer with his own flesh, and he'll be vindicated. And then he closes again, addressing his friends, and he gives them a warning. And the warning is based on the fact that God is the one who's doing this to Job, and that God has a good plan. God is working out God's plan. And, but that doesn't mean that the friends can, treat Job as a terrible sinner. They should be treating Job with mercy and compassion. Um, God will work out his plan. And Job's already said, God, since you've confused them, I know they won't succeed. Um, and so he's warning them, don't continue to pursue me like this, because that will end in judgment for you. So, and you can, read those lines with a whole range of tones of voice, right? Is he bitter? Is he angry? Does he, lean forward and look up into their eyes and plead with them? I mean, what is the tone of voice there? I think it's more closer to the latter. I think he's still concerned for their well-being. He's not just saying this as a threat. But um, so, so I think you can see how the passage is broken up. Now or not broken up, but the different sections in the passage. Um, so there are two uh, inclusios. There's the one bracket where Job warns his friends or speaks to his friends, right, which begins and ends the passage. And then there are two inclusios that are in the first section. In verses 5 and 20, Job says that his physical condition testifies against him. You can look at that 5. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my disgrace an argument against me, he's magnifying his physical condition. And then right after that, he says, verse 6, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net about me. He repeats those two thoughts together at the end of this section in verses 20 and 21. He says, my bones stick to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have mercy on me, O you, my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. So he starts with, they're using my physical condition against me. God has done this. He ends with, look at my physical condition. It's terrible. God has done this. So he's bracketing the whole first section with those two thoughts. And then, of course, the chapter is words to friends, start at the beginning and at the end. One other literary thing that you want to take note of in at the end of the first section, which is verse 22, Job uses the idea of pursuit or pursuing, and he's going to use that idea again at the end of the third section. So verse 22, to his friends, why do you, like God, pursue me? Why are you not satisfied with my flesh? And then in the very end, verses 28 and 29, the entire final section, if you say, how we will pursue him, and the root of the matter is found in him, be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, that you may know there is a judgment. So that brackets, or that inclusio there of going from the end of section 1 to section 3, that encompasses then all parts of the chapter. And so looking at that, you can get the basic idea or the basic thought here is that Job's friends should not pursue Job to condemn or persecute him because what's happening to Job is God's doing. And, that's already been stated, but it is emphasized by the repetition of this idea of pursuing, and you shouldn't be pursuing me. God is pursuing me. Don't you pursue me, um, type of thing. So that helps us kind of orient ourselves to, what's the summary of what Job is saying? Stop behaving the way that you are. Don't treat me this way because this is God's doing. And if you treat me, if you misunderstand the situation, which you do, and you treat me the way that you can have been treating me, there's only judgment ahead. So you shouldn't do that. So this has the idea of Job's concern, I think, for his friends, kind of brackets links all the sections together. So that's what I observed so far just about the literary structure. Anybody have any questions or thoughts about that? And I see Susan has joined us and Becky, hello. Um, we're in Job
Hello.
19. Hi, how are you?
Oh, doing well tonight. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. I'm glad you made it. Um, so we're in Job 19. I just finished reading through it, and you came in toward the end of my comments about the structure, but I'll refer to those comments and flesh them out later on. Anybody have any thoughts about any of that? Anybody notice anything that I missed as far as the structure?
I
guess I
have
see
a
it.
question, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
You know I am with words, and
Yeah.
you read in verse 22, "Why do you pursue me?" And in verse 28, you read, "How shall we pursue him?" Mine says
Mhm.
persecute. Can you help me understand the difference between
Hmm.
persecuting someone and pursuing someone? Don't you, when you
Yeah.
pursue someone, you've got to get them first and then persecute them? You see what I mean? I don't know, so I'm not trying to be funny, but that's what I am with words. I'm just very tuned into words.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
get that. Yeah, it's good to have a sensitivity to the various words used and to ask for the differences. It helps, kind of flesh out what's being said there. So,
yeah,
so you're using the New American Standard, I
yes,
believe, and
yes.
yeah, so the New American Standard is usually um, really what literal. So it's more literal. It's more of a word for word
Mhm.
type of thing.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the word definition for that Hebrew word that is there, and it has both to pursue or follow after, but it's got a negative connotation to pursue, to follow after, and then it says to persecute, to pursue, to follow after, like
Okay.
with the intent of persecuting or harming or something like that.
Mhm.
And
Right. Okay.
and so I think probably I'm just guessing now. I don't know, but I think that the New American Standard translates it persecute because the friends aren't actually pursuing Job. They're all sitting, next to each other. They're not chasing him anywhere, but they are. He has said, you're pursuing me with your words. You're trying to beat me down with your words.
Hmm.
And so, but I think as far as the idea of pursue has some kind of mobility and some physical motion associated with that word, that
Mhm.
what they're actually doing is they're condemning him, persecuting him, uh, opposing him, something like that. So
Okay.
I can see why the New American Standard might translate it like that, and but the literal meaning in this case is actually pursue, but
Okay.
with that kind of a connotation of harm. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yep.
Yeah, I see it like as the connotation of the assumption that the pursuit was successful. Because like when God pursues something, why do you pursue me as God does? When God pursues something, he achieves it. He doesn't, it's not a question of whether he's going to be able to reach what he pursues, right?
right,
And so
Mhm.
right,
he's sort of implying that just as God is pursued and able to touch me, like you are the same. And it's obvious for them because they're sitting right next to him. So they don't have to go very far to pursue.
Hmm.
So he's
Yeah.
sort of subtly implying that they're not just aiming daggers at him suggestively. They're condemning him. They're going all the way, just like God would when he pursues something.
Hmm. Right. Right.
Yeah,
I
because
think,
that's what I thought when I read persecute. It sounded like, well, they've already done it. They've already gone after Job. I mean, it's there. I mean,
Hmm.
they're relentless in this. So,
Yeah, I guess that's the
okay.
other implication there is that it's not just a one-time shot.
yeah.
It's every twist and turn that Job presents to them, they just continue to pursue him. They
Hmm.
continue to
Right.
attack him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
He knows that he can't make God stop, but it would be expected that you could throw your friend, throw the friends off the scent, right? You could give them a good argument or something, and they could go, oh yeah, and then they could stop pursuing it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you
yeah,
very much,
sure,
Mike and
yeah,
Michelle.
yeah. And Mike, you had something you wanted to say too.
Yeah, I guess I just had another comment. Again, this is I guess when we meet and discuss, I like to try to form the bigger picture from the particulars we're going through. And
Yeah.
Job continually just basically directly saying this is God touching me, like all of um these all of this affliction, he just attributes it to God. And his friends want to sort of attribute to him, this is your, misbehavior that has caused this. And that's just almost, it's like God is just an assumed natural consequence of his misbehavior. Um,
Mm,
but I guess what what I came across from where is it? Verse 11 and 12 is, Job is right. It is God that is afflicting him, but he's using Satan. I don't think Satan at the beginning here is just a premise to set up like God afflicting. It's demonstrating that God does afflict through Satan. And so you see verse 11 and 12 there, he's kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his adversary. And then his troops come on together. So, Job is acknowledging that, yes, God is responsible for this, but he's sending his troops, and that would be Satan to encamp around his tent and carry out this affliction. So, and I think that's, pointing that to Christ. Obviously, that was the culmination. That was the matchup that was happening that Christ came to earth for, was to defeat Satan.
mm. Yeah, and then to complete the thought there, I think is that, so that God arranged, our Savior's life so that he's in conflict with Satan and not just not just thinking of the times where Jesus casts out a demon or something like that, but every bit of opposition is both predetermined by God and
Mm,
satanic in its uh, what would you call it, execution,
mm,
you know. Uh, and there's also an implicit thing here in Job verse 12 Job 19:12, his troops come on together, they've cast up their siege ramp against me, etc., and
mm.
camp around my tent. uh, the implicit thing there is that he's saying to the friends, you're on the wrong side. you know
Yeah, he's almost sort of drawing this, like, look at this similarity here. You're here camped out with me, tormenting me.
Hmm.
Look at what Satan does. Yeah.
yeah, so he's so the other thing about the relationship, right, between God's action and Satan's action. Right? So in the first part of the book, we got to see how that works out uh, there, and then Satan is not mentioned again. He's after the second chapter, Satan, the accuser, he's never mentioned again, not even at the end. And so on the just playing the playing taking Job at his word here and saying
Mm,
he's not, let's just hypothetically say here that he's not considering secondary causes. I mean, not Satan. He's not thinking about Satan. He's thinking about the human people that are there attacking him in the wrong.
mm,
And he's attributing that God has sent them as like a thorn in the flesh type of thing,
mm,
right? And in his defense, Satan has not been attributed with any active involvement since chapter two, and all the things he did in chapter two were one-time only types of things. Um, he's not even credited with sending the friends. The friends are
mm,
credited with coming out of their own goodwill. So God has arranged the situation in Job's understanding. God has arranged this situation where God is silent and he is visiting Job with what looks like wrath on sinners. And he's arranged it that his friends, the counselors who he probably had great hope in when they showed up and was comforted to see, God has arranged that they misunderstand Job completely. And so I'm not, I guess what I'm saying is it seems like Job is not including Satan in his thinking right here, but maybe he is. I mean, it's an argument from silence either way, I
mm,
think. But but the main problem, I think, for Job, I think the friends are annoying. I think it's hurtful. Annoying is probably too soft. I think it's hurtful and discouraging and somewhat frustrating to Job to have his friends continue to say it's all your fault, Job. You just need to repent. But the biggest problem is Job knows he's innocent, and God is ignoring him. That's what he thinks is going on, and he realizes that his friends are convinced more and more of his guilt the longer that God ignores him. The longer he keeps saying, "God, you've got to fix this," and then God doesn't fix it. His friends are like, "Well, of course he's not listening to you because you're a terrible sinner." So that's sort of off the topic that we started with, but anyway, any thoughts about that, Mike, or anybody else?
yeah,
No,
I guess I'm gonna have to just, like I said, I sort of every once in a while sort of uh, find another piece that I think might fit into the bigger picture, and then have to sort of meditate on it for a bit. But um, yeah, I see that how Satan is sort of absent, so apparently absent, so to speak. And but it looks like his, you know, something of his spirit, the spirit of his work is continuing here. He's the accuser, and that's what his friends persistently do, right?
Right.
And then
So
sort of whether there's parallels here between Job and his accusers, and Christ being tempted in the desert. And
mhm. Yeah, and then there's also in Galatians 4, I believe it's Galatians 4. No,
mm,
Second Corinthians 4. Second
mm,
Corinthians 4, the God of this world has blinded the minds of those who do not believe.
mm,
That's speaking of the devil, the God of this world. And
yeah,
it's kind of a mocking title
mm,
that's being given. It's not literally true that Satan is the owner or God of this world, um, but anyway, he is credited there by Paul in Second Corinthians 4 with blinding the minds of those who don't believe. But in other
mm,
places, God is credited with blinding the minds of those who don't
yeah,
believe. And so there is that kind of Satan is working for Satan's own intention to destroy Job.
mm,
And God is working for God's own intention, which Job has no clear idea of. What is that clear? I mean, he knows that God is doing something. He just doesn't know what it is, except that it's
mm,
really unpleasant. And
yeah,
but God is going to bring about. So I would guess I would say this that it's probable that Job, while he has an understanding of Satan and Satan's work, doesn't mention him because he's not interested in Satan's goal. That it's whatever God is doing is the important part, and God's the one who's done this, and this is not where God is going to leave it. You know, I think probably there's something like that going on.
Mm.
So in the 70s and 80s, there was a revival in Southern California and probably in other parts of the United States. But one of the consequences of the revival was an increase in spiritual attacks, manifestations of demonic activity. And one of the I don't know, consequences of that was that some Christians got really interested in the devil and demons and started studying demonology and all that. And that ended up with a big portion of the church giving the devil too much credit for
Mm.
stuff. They go, "Oh no, the devil did that. Da 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 da." It's like, well, you're missing the sovereignty of God and the God's purpose in things. And they developed a theology which was kind of Zoroastrian, kind of like there's the forces of good and the forces of evil, and they're totally opposed, and they're always like God's trying to do something, but Satan's trying to stop him, and they're equally matched. And it's like, no. And so I do see in the New Testament where Satan is given some credit for things. He's blinding the minds of unbelievers, but most of the time it is uh, it is God who is credited, especially as you go through the Old Testament. God is credited with pretty much every bad thing that happens in the Old Testament. And
Mm.
you can say he uses agents to accomplish his will, but it's really the sovereignty of God, which is the idea that people in the Old Testament is so prominent.
Mm.
And um, but so that we don't forget that we have an adversary that prowls around like a roaring lion. He's mentioned from time to time in the New Testament,
Mm.
but not like he's actually got any autonomy or anything.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I don't recall who it was, but I heard recently a pastor uh, advising with respect to Satan or demons is like I think it was Martin Lloyd Jones that the two main errors he sees people making, and sometimes I guess I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, if people can do them both at once, but let's say he's talking about like sort of two different ways that people make errors about Satan is they make too little of him, and the other error is they make too much of him.
yeah, yeah, that's actually from C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
Probably Lloyd Jones was. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that might have been where he got it.
yeah.
You might have been
It's in
quoting
the
C.S. Lewis, actually.
yeah. I think it's in the introduction or preface to the Screw Tape Letters.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's and I don't think anybody in this gathering has an imbalanced view. Like they don't say, well, there is no devil or he doesn't
Mm,
do anything. And they don't
mm,
say he's responsible for every evil
yeah.
thing and he did it without God wasn't looking and then the devil did it and now God has to fix it.
Yeah.
Like no.
We've got to help God stop the devil.
That's right. That's right. That's I think that's what's behind Christian nationalism,
Mm,
actually. I think that
yeah.
is the thought there. Um, so there you go, making a political statement. I guess I'll make another political statement just for the record. I think that people are not obligated to obey illegal orders. Just
It's what you call a truism.
it's also being called seditious to say that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
loaded suggestion. Now let's talk about what constitutes an illegal order. It's
that's right.
whatever I think.
That's it.
I
All
I
right.
never heard one in 6 years of service.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Okay. Well, let's get into the text. Part one is verses 1 through 22. It's where Job rebukes his friends. He ends up asking for mercy from them. He's rebuking them because they're not giving him mercy. And he lists what God has done to him. Verse 1 through 4, he starts out with his complaint. Then Job answered and said, how long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me. Are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it be true that I have erred, my error remains with myself. Yeah. So the first four verses there, Job is obviously saying that their words have been an affliction to him and that they're afflicting him. I'm not sure he's attributing any intentionality to them. I think he's just saying your words have really hurt, you know. He says in verse 3, these 10 times you've cast reproach upon me. The 10 times, if you count them, it's been less than that, I think. Probably. I didn't actually count them. But 10 times means, or carries the idea of often or enough or too many times. In Genesis 31:7, we can look at that. Genesis 31:7, you'll remember the situation. Jacob is talking about Laban, and Jacob says to his wife, that your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, right? 10 times. It just means too much, too many, a lot. It's not exactly 10. And even if it is exactly 10, it doesn't change the fact that it means too many, too much.
It's an illustration of inflation, because nowadays we would say, he changed my wages 100 times.
Yeah.
And we would mean the same thing.
Yeah, we would mean the same thing. There is something in our culture I don't understand, though. I've heard people say this, oh, I haven't seen that movie in a minute. And what they mean is, it's been 20 years since I've seen that. You know, like, what, a minute? What are you talking about? I don't know where that's coming from. Some reference I'm not getting.
Then you have a New York minute, which takes about the snap of a fingers. That's a New York.
Yeah, New York minute, right. So in verse 5, Job says, if indeed you magnify yourselves against me and my disgrace, and make my disgrace an argument against me. So to magnify themselves is to speak proudly or assert superiority, to speak in a way that says, I know better than you. Promote yourself. I skipped over verse 4. Job says, even if it be true that I'll read the NIV, even if it is true that I have gone astray, my error remains my concern alone. This is a thing that, a statement that I can't figure out in my head. It sounds like what Job is saying is, my sin doesn't affect you, so why are you bothering talking to me about it? And that might be what he's saying, but I'm not sure. Anybody have any thoughts on verse 4?
You might be saying it's none of your business.
Yeah. He's claiming it.
Yeah, it's sort of like, who was it? Like David saying, it's only you, Lord, that I've sinned against. He's like, if I did something wrong here, it didn't affect you. It's not against you. It's between me and God.
Mm-hmm.
That depends on
okay.
David's sins we're talking about, huh?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Job has a better case than David. And
yeah, Job has a much better case.
Yeah, right? Yeah, night and day.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So so this would be then another reason for them to leave him alone, right? It's like, on your presupposition, I've offended God, and on my understanding, God is attacking me. So this is between me and God, right? We got to work this out. Right. Okay. Thank you for the help there. Wasn't sure about that. So Job goes on, as we've said, he says in verse 5, the second part, that they make his disgrace an argument against him. This is something that's come up before, and in fact, it's true. Bildad has specifically done that in the previous chapter, which we read last week, and I think we don't need to read the however many 16 or 17 verses I got listed there. But and then Job goes on to list the things that God has done, and I see the first part as kind of judicial courtroom type things, and also military type things that God has done against Job. And Job kind of talks about both of those things. So in verse 6, Job says, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net about me. That's interesting here, that the word for put, know then that God has put me in the wrong. Really interesting. That word means to bend or to falsify.
Hmm.
Job is saying here that God has perverted justice. God knows the right thing to do. He's not doing it.
So somehow that just caused me to think of like the inverse of justification, right?
Yeah.
He's sort of out. His perception is that God has done this to me for no reason, and
right.
You like nothing that I've done has warranted this. You could say the same thing for justification. Nothing that we've done ever warrants justification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the and that reminds me of the double imputation, right?
Mm.
Double imputation, which is Christ takes my sin, totally unwarranted. He takes
Yeah.
my sin. My sin is imputed to him, credited to him,
Yeah.
and he suffers for it. And then, of course, his righteousness and his obedience is credited to me
Mm.
equally as unwarranted, right? So
Right.
so what's happening here, of course, is a picture of Christ who has,
Mm.
but in this picture, Job has no understanding of what's happening. Whereas
Right.
Christ understood from the scriptures that he was going to suffer for sins that he didn't commit.
Yeah, this is a good illustration of what I was trying to like sort out in the last week, maybe in previous week, is how Job both pictures Christ, but he also pictures those that Christ saves and who are united in Christ, and how they, um, if where Christ says, if you blessed are those who suffer for my name's sake.
Mm. Mm.
Like those Christians that are persecuted are for believing in Christ, that they did nothing wrong, right?
Right.
They're suffering even though they've done nothing wrong, and the opposite, more than that, they've done the opposite. They've done what is right and just.
Yeah. Peter says the astounding statement, right? He says it's better to suffer for doing good than for doing
Mm.
evil, right? And it's in the context of, I mean, he's just explained, like for a couple of chapters, that Christ, who did nothing wrong, suffered
Mm.
and entrusted himself to the Father, the Creator, right?
Yeah.
He's called in reference to Jesus, and then in reference to Christians, he says the same thing. If you're suffering for doing good, then you need to entrust yourself to your faithful judge, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's astounding, right? It's better to suffer for doing good, which is to say, I didn't do anything and now I'm suffering.
Yeah.
And you see the picture of what God does for people who suffer for doing good, right? You see the picture in Daniel, fiery furnace, right? What are they doing? They're not worshiping the idol. They're doing the right thing. They get tossed into the fiery furnace. And
Right.
their defense is not, they never say, oh, we weren't doing anything wrong. They say, okay, you have to throw us in the fire. We get it, you know. But God will take care of us, whether we live or die. And that's the viewpoint of all suffering believers, at least that should be, right? The viewpoint of all suffering believers. I was just minding my business over here, and then I got caught up in this and now I'm suffering, but God's in charge and I'm going to trust him.
Joseph.
So, yeah, Joseph too, right? Joseph exactly is the same picture. So many pictures of that throughout.
Mhm.
Mordecai, right? When he says to Esther,
Mhm.
deliverance will come, if not from you, from somewhere else. His claim there is they're suffering for no other reason than that they're Jewish, which is not a justified reason to suffer. Right? So here Job uses a word which means, like I said, to pervert justice, to bend, to falsify. Those are the actual definitions. So Job is accusing God, or he's secondary. He's not accusing God to his face. He's telling his friends God has done this, right? He does accuse God to his face in other places, not to his face, but you know what I mean, in direct conversation. The interesting thing that I just noticed is that the NIV skips over the whole problem that could be created by using a word that means to falsify. So ESV, know then that God has put me in the wrong. Okay. Put me in the wrong. God actively did something, put me in the wrong. And know that God has wronged me. That's the NIV. Has wronged me. You could go, well, okay, that's passive or active. That sounds like it could be active, but the word for falsify is the word put, not the word. The NIV doesn't even have that word translated in their text. So I find that I don't know why they wouldn't do that, but except that it makes it sound like Job is saying something bad about God, which he is. It is true that God has put Job in this situation. And it is true that this situation does not reflect justice, but it is not true that that's the final word on the matter. No. So Job can't really say that what God is doing is just or unjust until the action is complete. Right? That makes sense?
Yeah.
So, but in a lot of cases too, I think, to be charitable, we might want to think about Job using the language of appearance. You know what the language of appearance is. Like you say, oh, the sun rises. Right? You're saying what it looks like, but not what it is. And so perhaps Job is doing that. This is what it looks like. It's not really this, but man, it certainly looks like this. um,
So, Chuck, in verse 9 here,
yeah.
Job 19, verse 9,
Mm-hmm.
seems like kind of an echo in a way of, or I don't know if maybe this means that Psalm 8 is echoing Job, but verse 9 of Job, he has stripped from me my glory and taken the crown from my head. Psalm 8, verse 5, yet you have made him lower than the heavenly beings, stripped of glory, and crowned him with glory and honor.
Yeah, good catch. I think I missed that. Yeah, very good. I think there's definitely definitely a connection there between those two ideas. I was thinking of it in terms of so that one is Psalm 8 is about the exaltation of the Son of Man, about the exaltation of Jesus, so the
And his
ascension,
humiliation and
enthronement.
exaltation.
Yeah, humiliation and exaltation, but the crowning him with glory and honor is the exaltation of the Son. And Job is about the humiliation, right? This part of Job is about the humiliation of one who has a high and glorious position. Job was the greatest of all the men in the East in his time period. So he has taken down quite a few notches, right? I mean, kids make fun of him now. He's the lowest of the low. So you have so when I read verse 9, I was thinking of Philippians 2, where Jesus lays aside his glory and sets
Mm,
aside his crown so that he may take it up with greater glory later, but he lays it aside in humiliation. And I was thinking about
mm,
that, but you're absolutely right. It is the mirror, the opposite of the Psalm 8 passage.
mm,
Right? It's a fall passage. It's a banishment from the garden, being stripped of your authority and
mm,
position and being sent out with nothing. That's what the passage is talking about. It's humiliation and bringing down. Um, so it is the exact opposite of what God creates mankind, creates Adam and Eve for, which is then fulfilled, perfectly in Jesus.
mm.
So yeah, good catch. I'm gonna make myself a note here so that I don't forget that. Um,
And I get, just to like complete that thought, like you read Psalm 8 and you think of it as talking about humans and how humans were created by God for this purpose, to do this for him, and to uh would could ultimately be crowned with glory for proper behavior with God. And but the um what then you see implied in Psalm 8 is that this is what Adam failed to do, and that therefore this is a picture of what how Adam fails to do that, and how Christ does it. And in order to do that, what Christ does, this is what he has to take on, is the humiliating state that Adam has put mankind into. Christ has to take on uh, and redeem that.
hmm. I'm gonna add to the outline. I'm just gonna add Psalm 8.
Hmm.
So when we get there, we can look it over. Thanks for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think there's something there. Um, oh, right. There was a part two of God has put me in the wrong and perverted justice. That's Job has said that, before, and that his friends have responded to him, yeah, to that very thing. So you can see like Job 8:3, Bildad responds and says, "Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right?" He's responding to something he thought he heard Job say,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so Job has been kind of saying things that sound like this. And Bildad picked up on it. Bildad, I think, listens better than everybody else. He he's the one who amassed all those quotes last week and said, "Look, Job, this is what you said," and he's actually got it. Whereas Elihu in chapter 22, Elihu's going to say Job said and did things that Job never said and did. So, um, so later on, the did I say Elihu? I did say Elihu. I didn't mean him. I meant Eliphaz. Eliphaz. Elihu is the guy that speaks at the end. Um, so in the end, in chapter 34, verse 12, Elihu, who has not yet spoken, the youngest guy, he says, "Of a truth, God will not do wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice." And again, I think he's bringing this up because both Job and at least one of Job's friends have made comments on this. And
Hmm.
Elihu wants to set the record straight. So not only do I think he's calling God perverter of justice, but these guys did too. Which it's not really a great argument because they misunderstood most things. But Elihu is one of the better guys. So, um, and we know that God's not unjust, right? It's never unjust. And so just really quickly run through three passages about that. Genesis 18:25, far be it from you, Abraham talking to God, Sodom and Gomorrah, far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And he will. And in that case, the righteous are spared. Even the people who aren't particularly righteous, some other members of Job's family, Lot's family, sorry, get spared. Deuteronomy 32:4, Moses says about God, the rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. And 2 Chronicles 19:7, now then, let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Be careful what you do, for there is no injustice with the Lord our God, or partiality, or taking bribes. We all know this. We all believe this. This is a core attribute of God: holiness, justice, righteousness, right? But yet, and this is the thing, but yet things happen in the world which don't look like they're just, and which, if that was the whole story, they're not just. Just give you an easy example, right? The crucifixion of Jesus. That is totally not just. There's nothing about that that was right. Right? Not one thing. And so that's, but that's not the end of the story, right? The Lord raises him from the dead and gives him the name above all names and sets him in authority over all people and things, gives him a people, and he saves them. So the Lord reverses the injustice of the worldly court, right? In that case, but this is the challenge that Job is facing, because he looks at his situation and he doesn't know what the outcome is going to be, and it certainly looks unjust. And I don't know about you guys, but I think probably a couple of times in my life the thought has crossed my mind after something happened that this is not fair. And has anybody figured out that the world's not fair?
Yeah.
It's not just me, right? It's like everybody knows that, right?
No.
Yeah.
So how do we reconcile that fact with those verses that I just read? God never does injustice. Everything God does is right, full of justice, right? He's not going to kill the wicked and the righteous at the same time, says Abraham, in reference to Sodom and Gomorrah. And then he follows it up with, the reason you won't do this is because, the God of the earth will do what is just and right. But it is a fact that righteous people and wicked people die on the same day in the same event, right? 9/11,
Right.
a lot of people that died knew the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we reconcile the unfairness, the injustice, this is Job's problem, right? What do we do about it?
Well, we don't know. There's always pieces that we don't know. Job doesn't know that Satan petitioned God to torture one of his believers, and he doesn't know that he got selected. Woohoo! Lottery win. And so he can only judge what's going on with him by what he knows. And it's hard because he knows that God is just, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. And we have the same problem. We don't know all of God's thinkings and all of his whys. And so what we're called to do is to trust that his plans are perfect. And since God is perfect, his plans are just.
Right.
And maybe we'll know what the justice is before we go home, and maybe we won't. But we can trust that whatever is happening, God's plan is perfect.
Yeah,
That's right.
so I think there's that's absolutely right. And that's the way that the Bible teaches us to look at life and all things. I think there are two reasons that we can be at peace. Well, three. one is that we turn it over to God and he gives us his peace as he promises. But another reason is that one reason is Job, and the other reason is Jesus. And what I mean by that is that Job, he wants to know what's going on. That's really clear, right? He kind of has the why question, floating above his head the whole time, right? And but does he ever get an explanation? He never gets an explanation. God shows up, and Job says, "Okay, good enough for me," right? Totally don't need to tell me anything. I'm good. That's actually, he says it more like, "Oh no," but Job never gets an explanation, and Job is content at the end of the book while not getting an explanation. So there's Job, and there's Jesus. Jesus suffers terribly, unjustly, and God resurrects him from the dead, overturning the earthly court and vindicating everything Jesus said and did. And then he exalts Jesus. And so I can suffer now in comfort, which is weird. Suffer in peace with God comforting me, because I see Job, who never gets an explanation, and it turns out an explanation is not required to be at peace, just to know that I will one day see God and it will all be right. That's the only thing that I need to know. And then I have Jesus, who I have the supreme example of God making everything right, far beyond, a normal person's expectations, right? But just, he suffers terribly, worse than I ever will. And he is exalted greatly, higher than I will ever be. But that gives me confidence, is that God doesn't make things right now. He doesn't make things right in this life, not every time, and probably not most times. And you might be able to even argue that he never makes it right in this life. But I know it will be made right. And so, we sometimes idealize our faith and we go, I'm trusting God, and I don't, I'm have this great faith that things will be right. But you actually have so many examples that everything will be right, that it doesn't really, it's almost, I don't want to overspeak, but I'm going to overstate on purpose to make the point. It's almost like it's not faith. You've got all kinds of evidence that God will do what he said, and he will make things right, and the wicked will be judged and the righteous will be saved. You've got lots of evidence. And so we believe it, but we believe it because of who God is. And we see who God is by looking at what he's done. And so I think we can look at the apparent injustice, or we can just say, you know what, this world isn't just. This world is not fair. But this world, to quote James Bond, this world is not all there is. Right. So, yeah. So, anyway, because we're not atheists, we have hope. If the atheist, if he thinks this is all there is, this is the best that there ever will be, that's terrible. It's really, really bad. So, and it's 8:03. Any other comments before we end?
No.
Look like we're good? Okay. All right.